Welcome to another episode of Christian Answers. My name is Pastor Jeff Short, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that is really incredible. It's incredible that it ever has to be even talked about, but the state of the public schools, the state of education in our country has now come to a new low, all-time low, where they are now bringing in to schools for children to hear and see transgenders, to read to the children, to have a story time to the children. And the parents are all supporting this in some of these school districts. And today we have a couple videos exposing this problem in our public schools. We all knew that there was a problem in the public schools. We all knew that the educational system is pretty much lost as far as sound philosophy, sound ethical, moral principles. It has basically bought into the progressivist lie that secular society is the way of the future, that we need to dispense with all Judeo-Christian values, we need to dispense with the Bible. Prayer in school was thrown out in the 60s. And we've seen a steady decline in the public schools and the educational system since then. Not meaning that people haven't been able to get an education, because probably today more people are educated than ever before. But what does the education mean? What quality, what kind of education are they in fact getting? That's the big problem. And the quality of the education has gone down, unfortunately, as more and more people have access to an education. The actual education itself has gone down. Because if you look back into the records of education in even the 1800s and the early decades of the 19th century, the 20th century, in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, if you see the people who did go to school, they actually had to learn things, and they actually learned ancient languages like Greek and Latin, and they had to learn the history of words. And there were a lot of things that kids today don't learn because of the dumbing down effect. That's what former Secretary of Education William Bennett had decried, the dumbing down of education in this country. Well, we're seeing now not only dumbing down, not only passing kids that can't read and write in high school and graduating them and throwing them into the community college system where they have to take a year or so of remedial reading and writing. Not only that is taking place, the quality has gone down, but the moral and ethical standards that used to be in public school pretty much gone out the wayside right now, to the point where now we're talking about something that really shouldn't even be something that parents have to concern themselves with. And that is, when they send their boy or girl to school, they shouldn't have to be worried about some transgender person coming in and reading them books, story time with the transgenders. But that's exactly what has been happening. And it happened the other day, none other than Michelle Obama School. And it's just more in line with the whole Barack Obama liberal progressive agenda. And parents need to be aware of this. This is actually happening. It's not something that is a nightmare. It's not something that some fiction writer came up with. This is actually happening in the public schools right now, where they gather kids together and they have a story time, and we all know what story time is. If you've ever gone into, you may not even have seen this in a public school, but you might have seen it in a bookstore. I remember sometimes I would go into a Barnes & Noble, and you would see children gathered around an adult, usually a woman, but sometimes a man, gathered around an adult in the children's book sale area, and they would read a book. and it would be called story time. And some of the parents who were homeschooling would know that there was story time at Barnes & Noble at 10 a.m. or so, sometime like that. And they would get their kids over there, and it was a good time to encourage them to read and get into books and so forth. And it also was a good chance to preview some of the better children's books that the store was selling. So that would happen, and it's always happened. Everybody knows this. Story time. Kids would look forward to it. Well, now you have to be careful, because you might have, for political reasons, you might have a so-called transgender person come in and read a transgender book or promote transgenderism and call it story time. And so today we're going to be looking at a couple of videos that were produced by a couple of Christian broadcasters, and they do a good job in exposing this. And it's just another thing that we have to be praying about, and we have to be praying against. We pray that this trend, this transgenderism, seems like after the Supreme Court decision 2015, the Obergefell decision legalizing so-called gay marriage, now the big push is toward transgender rights. We saw this Bruce Jenner whole big controversy, and now they're mainlining this, mainstreaming this, and it's come to the children's time now. And so if you're in a bookstore and it's story time, you have to look around and you have to pray, Lord, I hope this isn't a transgender story time, because that's what's taking place. Or worse yet, if you send your children or your grandchildren to school, you have to pray that they don't be exposed to this LGBTQ agenda, and that there might not be some transgender in there reading them a book promoting the unethical, immoral lifestyles of these people. So this is something that we have to pray about, we have to vote against, we have to discourage from coming into our society, as if we can hold it off, because it seems to be the trend of the future. But we have to give it a try. We have to try to stop this whenever we can. So let's look at a couple of these videos, and then I'll come back at the end and make a few more comments, because this is very important. We need to deal with it. We can't just stick our heads in the sand. We can't hide from it. It's here, it's in our face, and we have to oppose it in any way we have left to oppose it. So let's watch those videos right now.
California's always been pretty kooky, which is why for decades normal people have called it the land of fruits and nuts. But now the demonic plague of liberalism has turned it into a place that is indistinguishable from an episode of The Twilight Zone. Libraries in San Francisco and Los Angeles are now hosting Drag Queen Story Hour, where drag queens come in and read books to the children to teach them about gender identity and diversity. This demonic-looking drag queen wearing a wedding dress and having horns come out of its head just read some stories to the children at the Long Beach City Public Library, which proudly tweeted out this thank you, saying that it was there to celebrate Drag Queen Story Time and LGBTQ ABCDEFG History Month. I'm sorry to tell you that this is not fake news or some satire from The Onion. This is actually happening, and liberals are actually bringing their children to these events.
Who wants to be a drag queen when they grow up? Who is ready for a story? The hips on the drag queen go swish, 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 swish.
This one's reading My Princess Boy, where the description on Amazon says, Dyson loves pink sparkly things. Sometimes he wears dresses. Sometimes he wears jeans. He likes to wear his princess tiara even when climbing trees. He's a princess boy. Word about Drag Queen Story Hour is starting to spread, and obviously normal people are quite upset about it. And this guy decided to respond to somebody who was critical of the Story Hour, saying that he loves the satanic drag queens, and that he's going to have 2 drag queens be the celebrity judges at his annual children's pumpkin carving. This demonic creature's name, Scott Wiener, rang a bell, and then it dawned on me. This is the California state senator who introduced the bill which Governor Jerry Brown just signed into law that makes it no longer a felony for gay people to purposefully spread HIV. This is literally the guy which introduced the bill, which is now law in California, which makes purposefully spreading AIDS as serious of a crime as slapping somebody in the face. Governor Jerry Moonbeam Brown also signed a new bill into law allowing people to list on their driver's license that they're not male or female. Now they have a third option, that they're non-binary. By the way, Oregon recently put a similar law in place so that people can now choose X as their sex instead of male or female. Just X. All of this is very depressing, I know, so let's end this video by watching Megyn Kelly dance. Liberalism has been so devastating in 2017 that we lost Megyn Kelly, once the pretty face of Fox News, who now turned to the dark side and has a morning show on NBC where she's doing this. I had to mute this clip and put some different music in there or I'd have some copyright issues with YouTube, but this is what happened to Megyn Kelly. Megyn, no! Megyn, please, snap out of it. You were the chosen one. Don't do this to us. I'm Mark Dice, thanks for watching.
Hey Faith family, it's Brother Mario, the Vigilant Christian. I pray you guys are having a wonderful day. I wanted to go ahead and make this video because I believe this is very, very important to warn my brothers and sisters in the Lord, especially those of you who are raising young kids today in this wicked, godless, perverse generation. This is an image that I'm sure you're shocked by. I mean, I was when I seen it, of Zoshimoshi. I don't know if I said that right. Actually being given an opportunity to read children's book to children at the Michelle Obama Library. So this is the image taken, and I'll go ahead and read the caption that he posted here to his Instagram. I got to read to the children today, and it was one of the best experiences I've been given as a drag queen. It's so important to have representation and normalize all the letters in LGBTQIA+. They're just going to put plus there because we know it's just going to be endless in everyday lives. I saw so many excited faces. It filled my heart with so much joy and hope to come back again soon. Thanks again to everybody who made this opportunity a reality and makes such a successful LGBT event. So now, first of all, I just want to point out, I am in no way attacking this individual personally. What I believe is the Bible, and the Bible very clearly says that all humans are fallen. We all have adopted the sin nature of Adam, and because of that, we're all broken. So I'm not singling this individual out to just persecute him. In fact, I see that very clearly he is spiritually blind and is dealing with a lot of spiritual confusion. In fact, I pray for his salvation and that Jesus Christ would one day give him true spiritual sight and remove the blinders and allow him to hear and see what the Spirit of God says and come to salvation. But the reality is, right now, in his spiritual blind state, he's being used of Satan for an agenda that he himself is most likely guaranteed not even conscious of. Now, here are the fundamental truths that are being attacked here. We see in the Bible, in Genesis chapter 5, verse 2, it clearly says that God had created in the beginning mankind to be male and female, that we have biological genders that are different. He, in fact, wired us with chromosomes to scientifically prove this. No matter how much the transgenders or that community wants to try and twist up what gender actually means, God defined it, and he put it in the science, and he put it in the biology. Now, what we're dealing with this issue particularly is a man dressing up as a woman. They're called drag queens. Now, in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 5, it says that a woman shall not wear man's clothing, nor shall a man put on woman's clothing. For whosoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. Now, I know, see, this is the thing. The Bible can sting, the truth can sting, but the truth is the truth, whether you like it or not. And we're to submit to the truth of God. Just because it can be displeasing to us, that doesn't mean we have the authority to change what God has declared in His Word. So this is the truth, that a man is to behave as a man, to represent himself as a man, and a woman as a woman, that there are gender differences. Now, we are equal, but we're different. And in being different, we're actually complementary, and there's this beautiful coming together of male and female and all that stuff. But we can get into biblical male and female and gender in another video. But this is really fundamental to understand, brothers and sisters in the Lord, because we know also from Scripture that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. So when we see these type of events happen, and it's not the first time, this is in fact another one that happened. You had Drag Queen Story Hour, where they brought in the drag queens once again to read stories to kids, to LGBT supporting parents. And this really just grieves my heart to see that this type of confusion is being accepted and even put out there in front of these children by their guardians, by those God had placed in their lives to protect them from these false ideologies that is only going to confuse them and really prepare them for the coming New World Order system. This spiritually confused mankind that is quote-unquote evolving right before us. But anyways, that's one thing to point out here. So very saddening. We need to realize that these are signs that we need to get into prayer. This is like the enemy. You have to see it in the spiritual, right? It's like the Bible says, be sober, be vigilant. He's like a lion. So it's as if he's approaching the cubs over here and he's trying to get them while they're weak and vulnerable. And I'm just talking, I'm 31 years old, so my rebellion didn't even happen that long ago. If you know my own personal testimony, I lived a very rebellious life when I was a teenager. I mean, at 13, 14 years old, Hollywood and BET, rap culture, music, the world just got a hold of me. And it just got me to rebel against my parents, and I thought my parents and their traditions and their values and their morals were stupid, and that I was the next evolved, progressing culture and generation. And they're doing this to the kids again, and this is why it's important that you protect your kids from things like Hollywood and the influences that they're going to receive through the school systems and their peers and the culture out there, because slowly they're going to creep this stuff in, and they're going to try and take the kids away from us, steal their minds away from us to convince them. And this actually lines up with the Bible, that we are false, that we are old, and our traditions need to be done away with for them to even progress to this new evolved mankind where everyone's accepted and everything's good. But this is a delusion, this is a deception. So be on guard, be vigilant, guys. The enemy is definitely moving in. We must pray for those individuals who are like this guy, who are spiritually confused to this point, that they would come out of this, because it makes amazing and powerful testimonies. And I encourage you to take the time to actually go through some. There's some on YouTube, some ex-drag queens who've given up that lifestyle and followed after Jesus and have accepted that God has made them a man or a woman or however it is. And it's a beautiful transformation, because there's a lot of bondage that comes in this, and this is what's sad. There's actually, this man is in severe spiritual bondage, but it's being promoted by Hollywood, which that's their job, is to make this vogue and cool and trendy. So they're making spiritual bondage look like desirable and cool, and this is what you want. I mean, it wasn't even just a couple years ago that this stuff was considered like a mental illness, and these people need treatment and stuff. And now it's, oh, YouTube, YouTube told us, the YouTube proud to be, and all the YouTube transgenders and all these, people being promoted by the media out there. Well, they've done a great job at making the kids think that it's cool, that it's trendy, it's what's in, and your parents aren't cool if they're not with it. So be on guard to that, guys. Have a blessed and wonderful day. This was a Watchman broadcast. I pray it encourages you. This is not to, despair you or make you feel down about the evil and wicked world that we live in. I mean, it's a reality. If you read your Bible, this fallen world isn't supposed to be about bunnies and best life now and big smiles and happiness all the time. There's a season for everything, and we're going to be going through them while we go through the valley of the shadow of death. But let's stand strong. Let's stand firm. Let's be the salt that the world needs to preserve its morality, to preserve its traditional godliness in the culture, so that we can stand as firm and as long as possible. Have a blessed day. Stay vigilant. Fear no evil.
Well, as you can see, this is a pretty disgusting thing that's taking place, and we've known for a long time that this kind of stuff was taking place, but we didn't think it was going to come into the public square this fast. In other words, we've seen these disgusting displays at these so-called pride marches, and we've seen this kind of activity done with these perverse people, but they've usually done it within their own events, their own functions. But now it's becoming mainstream. Now it's becoming something that there's a growing acceptance of it in society, and that's the problem. And if you noticed in these videos, a couple of them showed that the parents were in the background, and they were smiling, and they were nodding, and they were encouraging their young children to affirm this perversion. Now, that's the most discouraging thing. Children look to their parents as leaders. They're there to guide them and direct them. Because children, what does the Bible say? Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. So naturally, children don't have knowledge. They don't have wisdom. They don't know what's right and wrong. And they have to be trained. They have to be trained in what's right. They have to be trained in what's wrong. They need to be trained in knowing the difference between right and wrong. And that is the role of the adult parents and the grandparents. That's the role of the adults in the child's life. Well, unfortunately, we have a whole generation of adults who are acting in the most irresponsible way. And so if you can't even get common sense, if you can't even get a bit of wisdom into the minds of the parents, then how are the children ever going to learn the difference between right and wrong? If you saw in these video clips, you saw the parents. One woman had her little child in her arms, rocking it back and forth and sort of dancing along with this moral pervert teaching the children how to accept and affirm so-called transgenderism. In other words, poison is being administered to the children in the form of a moral poison, ethical poison, values poison. And the parents are smiling and just going along with that and letting that happen. In other words, here is a danger. It's not a physical danger here yet. There are physical dangers. But there are physical dangers, but there's not just physical dangers, there are moral dangers and spiritual dangers. And here are parents just letting this transgender person promote and indoctrinate the children in this false philosophy of acceptance of moral and immorality, immoral acts. And so you have to understand that this is not a problem with the children. It's not anything wrong with the children. Children are children. They're just going to absorb whatever is in their environment. They're going to listen to their parents. They're going to believe what their parents say. They're going to follow the example that they see before them. And unfortunately, we see irresponsible parents. So who's to be rebuked here? The children? No, it's the parents that need to be rebuked. And we need to do that. If you have relatives, if you have friends, if you have neighbors that have bought into this whole LGBTQ agenda and will go along with this and have transgender story hour and take their children to this evil, wicked thing, I mean, those are the people you have to talk to. You have to talk to your adult friends and adult relatives and adult family members who see no problem with this. And you have to show them, convince them to say, hey, look, I mean, we have to be responsible. We are the adults. We're the grown-ups. And children will not gravitate to this stuff unless their parents take them to this stuff, unless their parents indoctrinate them in this stuff. And when you look at these video clips where you see the parents in the background smiling and bringing their children and allowing their children to be a part of this scene, I mean, this is a moment when a parent should walk out. This is a moment when a activist parent should get on the phone and call City Hall and call the school board and call the PTA and raise a stink about this. This is that kind of a moment. I mean, we hear all about all kinds of controversies brought up by the PTA and the school boards and town councils and all these other things. Many times over trivial and small and petty things. But here is a legitimate gripe. I mean, if you're a parent and you want to stay positive and you want to have a good attitude and you want to encourage your school teachers and administrators, that's one thing. But when you see a clear and present danger to your child's spiritual health and moral health, that is the time that you are to speak out and be a nuisance. Are you kidding me? If the school doesn't have enough common sense to say no to this kind of activity, if the teachers of that school, if the administrators of that school, if the principal doesn't have enough common sense to say, no, we don't bring in these so-called transgender people to read and have a story time with the kids and exposing them to this kind of ridiculous, immoral perversity, then you as a parent need to intervene and say, I'm either removing my children from these activities or I'm removing them from the school. We're going to go to a school that doesn't believe in this garbage. You have to do something. And we have to speak out as Christians. We need to not just let this stuff go. We need to not just let this happen. I think a lot of Christians don't like to cause trouble. We want to be peaceful. We want to get along with others. We don't want to be quarrelsome. We don't want to be argumentative. We don't want to be troublemakers. But in this instance, parents, believe me, you need to step out. God will bless you if you step out. You need to stand for the truth and say, look, we don't want our children exposed to this filth. We don't want our children exposed to bad examples. What does the Bible say? Bad morals corrupts good kids. You know, a bad moral example can set a bad future for other children. Rotten apples in the bunch will corrupt the others. We need to be firm on this and say, no, we won't stand for it. And we need to be in prayer. It's not just a political thing. It's a moral and spiritual battle that we are facing. So I hope that this has informed you. I hope this has got you stirred up about this enough to pray about it at least, and also to speak out against it. And we'll see you back here next week on another episode of Christian Answers. God bless.